Is Seasonal Discovery about to die, and what's the hell to Classic? I think you're gonna be shocked to know that this year has been very out of the ordinary for Classic WoW, at least population-wise, and I guess this also is an excuse to compare how we are doing now compared to when Classic came out and the whole journey of Classic so far. This is a graph of the entire population of Classic ever since Classic came out in 2019. Actually, a month after that, this is from September and Classic came out in August. That is not gonna be a big deal because of a simple reason, and that is that this is raid logs, and most people took a long time to get to a raid because you got level 260 on 1x XP, and that takes like at least a week. For most people it took like a month or two because people have lives. So that's why when Classic came out, you could see this little ramp up over time of people eventually hitting 60 and eventually raiding. This little dents right here, if I am not mistaken, is the holidays. Yeah, you see that's December 22 and January 26. But as you can see, throughout all of 2019, WoW started growing, and of course, over here 2020, we start getting the lockdowns. We go in lockdown and boom, that's the absolute peak we hit. This peak was when Blackwing Lair came out, or a week after or before that, I am not sure. Either way, the launch of Blackwing Lair is the biggest time Vanilla WoW has ever been, and this, just so you get a comparison of what I'm talking about and why this is a little wacky, this is just under 500,000, 490,000 raiders. Of course, the numbers are gonna look way smaller than the other raids because in Vanilla getting an ult is really hard. So I would say the only one where getting a ult is even harder is TVC, and the numbers seem to support that. But at the same time, by the time TVC came out, a lot of people had level 60s, and going from 60 to 70 is way easier than going from 1 to 60. So I think overall, for most people, if they played since Vanilla and they had ults since Vanilla, getting an ult in TVC was easier. But anyhow, if I were to bet here, this is probably like an average of 1.5 characters per player. Of course, that changed after BWL because that's when the economy went to hell and everybody was doing GDKPs, like 3 GDKPs a week was nothing out of the ordinary. So even if you see the numbers kinda plateauing, I think this drop-off over here is like a much bigger drop-off than you could imagine, because the alts are lifting these numbers up. And of course, by the time Naxxramas is out and stuff, we go down to like 230,000 people. Now, normally this would be the high point to compare. This would be the place where you would go, wow, that's the biggest players we're ever gonna have. But that changed in Rato the Lich King. As you can see, this little dimple in TVC here, it looked almost as good as Classic Vanilla, which honestly is kinda surprising. I was always thinking that TVC was going to be way smaller. I never actually bothered checking this graph until today. But then out here is Rato the Lich King, and look at that, 623,000, that's right. Rato the Lich King was way bigger than Classic. Well, not really. This is Rato the Lich King pre-patch, and this is the launch of the expansion right here. And this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 5 and 6 week after the raids came out in Rato the Lich King, so these numbers are all ults, and getting ults in Rato the Lich King is very, very easy. So I think this number is probably a little smaller than the Classic number itself, probably even quite a bit smaller, like 30% less than this, the actual player numbers. But of course, everybody had ults in Rato the Lich King, so it was very easy. And that bumped up the numbers. And of course, this second bump over here, that's gonna be ICC. Eastern Europeans love their ICC. There is a simple reason why like Rato the Lich King was such a big deal, and that's the private server community. Rato the Lich King has always been the biggest private server community, so when the official game came out, a lot of people came flooding from private servers into Classic, and yeah, a lot of people that never played Classic before were in Rato the Lich King, so it did catch a lot of players. Now, sadly, and I think this is alarming for the prospects of the future of Classic, we eventually gotta get to Cataclysm. And this is Cataclysm so far. In Cataclysm, an expansion that people consider the start of retail, an expansion where getting an ult running as long as you get enough money for it is pretty much instant, we are only looking at a population peak of 316,000. That's the peak of Cataclysm right there, and it's already quickly dropping. We are currently sitting at 190,000, which is not a terrible number. If you compare that, that's the numbers we had at the end of Classic Vanilla when people were bored on Naxxramas. But of course, coming from such a high in Rato the Lich King and such a high in Vanilla and TVC to this is kind of alarming. And you can kinda see the pattern forming up here, like at the peak of Cataclysm was not too different from the peak of TVC, for example, but people gave up on it almost instantly. Now I am gonna use very sophisticated science in paint.net to show you what I'm talking about. We're gonna grab this one here. We're gonna change the colors. There you go. This watermelon color thingy, that's Cataclysm right there. And if we overlay it with TBC right here. Now, I do not think it's fair to compare it with the launch of Vanilla because that was one of the most hype release launches of the entire decade. But comparing it just to TBC, which was not a very well received expansion, mind you, Cataclysm had a very similar start to TBC. But after the 4th week or so, when people in TBC started making their ults and getting more raids done and stuff, the Cataclysm population already started plummeting. Look at this. I am sure if I were to talk to a bunch of people that play Cataclysm, they would give you the same thing. And it's that Cataclysm is a fine expansion. You know, raiding on Cataclysm, the early tier 11, it was pretty fun. I liked it, but it doesn't have any staying power. I would much rather be playing Seasonal Discovery or something else because Cataclysm is a raid logging expansion, and once again the raids are good, the classes are good, but I don't want to raid log to 2 expansions at the same time. Not to mention, I guess, and this is a personal one, I know this is not what happened to everybody, but in my case, just like I came to the realization that the amount of tryharding that it would take me to get me from like farming normal and chilling to doing heroic on a decent pace is absolutely insane. Like, I do not want to spend like hours upon hours grinding for gold just to be able to raid in Cataclysm. That just hits too close to home. That's why I quit Classic back in BWL. But yeah, what I'm trying to show you here is I think Pandaria is gonna face a very similar issue. Now, if I were to guess, most people are going to like Pandaria more than Cataclysm. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to see the exact same thing. We're going to see a big spike when the expansion comes out, perhaps even a little bigger than Cataclysm. Then there's going to be a huge drop-off. There's going to be a couple spikes every time a new raid comes out, which is not the case that you see in TBC, for example. It's pretty stable, Classic pretty stable. You see that in Rato de Lich King already. There's a huge peak at Ulduar, and then TOC comes out and boom, catapum. I was expecting ICC to be a lot bigger than it was, honestly. But we're going to hit a threshold very soon, and it's most likely going to be World Classic. I do not think Blizzard has any appetite for making World Classic, where the new expansion method doesn't work. And that's gonna be a video for another day that I really want to talk about, like my views on how expansions should be run outside from the seasonal Classic server, which of course I am a big fan of Classic Plus and whatever. But as far as the new expansions for Classic go, we are clearly seeing they are running out of gas. I think another thing that Blizzard is realizing slowly is that this is a zero-sum game. They are eventually just competing against themselves. Season of Mastery was a complete failure and that didn't actually set into them. But if I were to ask a lot of people like why they quit Cataclysm, I would get that a lot of people will tell me, well, I am already playing Season of Discovery and I want to play that. And I think Blizzard is going to be a lot more cautious on the next, let's say, 4 years of trying not to compete with themselves. It's no secret that Phase 3 absolutely destroys Season of Discovery. Look at that, this is the absolute lowest we've ever been, 20,000 raiders. Phase 3 was twice as long as all the other phases. It was actually longer than the 2 previous phases combined. And the reason they had to do that, even though they will never admit to it, is because they did not want to hurt the Cataclysm launch. Blizzard essentially decided to sacrifice Season of Discovery to save Cataclysm. And it didn't quite work. Late TBC and early Rato de Lich King, they only had to compete with Season of Mastery, which was a very weak product. But Season of Discovery is actually bigger than the peak of Classic, believe it or not. This is the peak of Season of Discovery. At Phase 1, we had 496,000 people for a re-release of Classic WoW Vanilla once again with a little tweaks and changes. The absolute highest Vanilla WoW has ever been is 490,000. You can see right there, 490, 490, perfect. A little bigger. It's a little bigger than Classic WoW back in the day. Of course, raiding was a lot easier in Season of Discovery, so that's inflating the numbers a lot. But I think this is the reason that they are gonna commit a lot more to Season of Discovery in the next couple months, and I think we're gonna get Phase 5 faster, and we're gonna get Phase 6 faster, and they wanna be done with it as fast as possible. Whether it's obvious or not, we are taking a chunk of all the other expansions. But one thing that gives me a little bit of hope for Season of Discovery is, first of all, I think we're gonna get content a lot faster because they realized the mistake, and I think now they value Season of Discovery a little higher than Cataclysm. They are probably gonna prioritize Season of Discovery launches over Cataclysm launches. And the War Within already came out, so they got your sub from that. So probably next month or month and a half, they can do Classic stuff again. Don't want to release everything at the same time because that means only people subscribe once. But if you stagger it a couple months away, you get subs constantly. That's what they want. But Phase 4 definitely has had more staying power, if not the raw numbers, than Phase 3. This is the launch of Phase 3, this is the second week of Phase 3, and immediately it started to die. People hated Sunken Temple with a passion. But when Phase 4 came out, even though the numbers were smaller once again, it's been 1 week. 2 weeks. We're on the 3rd week, the 4th week actually of the phase, and it's still slowly growing. More people are rolling ults, and more people are trying to raid in phase 4. A lot of people that quit in phase 3 are slowly taking the chance or giving another chance to Season of Discovery now. So who knows, maybe with a little bit of luck, especially because we don't need to level again after this phase, we might actually grow a little bit more than phase 4 in phase 5. Maybe the bar is a little low, but I think we could probably reach phase 3 numbers very soon, provided they do not abandon Season of Discovery again, which is possible, and that would absolutely suck. So yes, I don't think it's all doom and gloom for Season of Discovery, even though we're at a bad time right now. Absolutely we are. But I don't think it quite sunk in on you guys how big Season of Discovery was. All the people that say we want fresh era, I mean, most of them gave up already. There is no way you look at those numbers if you're Blizzard and you think for a minute that anything else but doing this again every year or 2 years is the way to go. Even if they sacrifice Season of Discovery at the stake for the altar of Cataclysm and the War Within, I think Agrend is gonna have a much easier time going to the management at Blizzard and tell them, look at the numbers I gave you, just give me like 10 more employees because I did this with 25 people. Just imagine what I can do with 10 more people, okay? Give me more funding, give me the funding I need. So here's hoping, and yes, just in conclusion, I think the short-term prospects of Season of Discovery and Classic as a whole are probably a little grim right now. We're gonna go through a bit of a drought, but the long-term prospects of Classic, I absolutely got no doubt that this thing is gonna be even bigger. The interest is there, and I think the company politics, especially after the purchase from Microsoft, the game is actually gonna get done now. Subscribe, join the Discord, and thank you for watching.